Hi everybody. Just left the Suchess area again. I managed to wiggle my way over there riding some other roads. It's my Friday to go up and ride without my wife. She's working today, so thought I'd take the opportunity. The weather's nice, and thought I'd decide to come up and ride around this area again. I've shot a lot of video up around here, around this area. This is part of the Six Gap Road, and so I just thought instead of just doing the scenery this time, I thought maybe we'd talk about a few things. Quite a while back, I had someone respond to a comment I made in a video about how I had learned to be a private pilot, which is something I'd always wanted to do. Again, I've been a very lucky guy. I've been able to do almost everything I wanted to do, but I want to tell you the difference between riding a motorcycle and flying a small airplane. Well, everybody that will see this video knows how to ride a motorcycle. You know what it's all about. You know, unless you're grandfathered in like I did, you have to go get you have to take a test. Sometimes it depends on your state or wherever you are in the world, but here in Georgia you have to take a class. You have to pass a written test and a skills test riding in and out of some cones in a parking lot. I don't know what that teaches you about motorcycling, but you know, that's what the state requires, and you get your license. In North Carolina, it's very much the same thing. When my son wanted to get his, because of his age, he got a 6-month provisional license. At the end of 6 months, he had to take his test, and if he passed the test, he got the, oh, there you go. If he passed the test, he got the, he got his full license. Well, I was grandfathered in, so I never had to do any of that. You know, back when I learned to ride, we didn't have a special license for motorcycles. So since I had been riding when the law was passed, I just went down and said, yeah, I've been riding for years, which was the truth. And they said, okay, well, here's your endorsement. And so I've never had to learn that. Well, flying is a whole different ballgame. Now, I learned to fly in the early 1990s. I went down to a local airfield, which is about 20 minutes from the house in North Carolina. A little place called Goose Creek Airfield in Goose Creek, North Carolina. It was a little bitty little runway, pretty rough. It was paved, but it was pretty rough. It had a lake and parked airplanes on one side, and on the other side, it was the runway was actually built on sort of a small dam for the lake, and so on the other side, it just dropped off severely. And they actually had a tank farm out there. Now, if you don't know what a tank farm is, these big giant thousands of gallons tanks that they bury in the ground to put gasoline in, diesel fuel, things like that at gas stations. Well, they recently changed the laws, well, since the 90s, to where you can't have these underground anymore because they tend to leak over time. So this place was a tank farm where they brought these things and they cut them up for scrap steel. And I've told stories about that before, but so I went in there and I knew a guy that had an airplane that had flown out of there. And he took me and introduced me to everybody, and I asked them, I said, what's involved? And they said, well, this is what it's going to cost you. About, you know, and said everybody's different, but 40 hours minimum of dual instruction flying time. Well, wasn't that? No, I take that back. It's 40 hours total time. It's not 40 hours of dual. I think 20 hours of dual time is what's required. But said that you know, and renting an airplane, of course. Well, at the time, I could rent a Cessna 150, and my instructor pay him too, for 1 hour was $50. Now that's rented wet. That's with fuel. So it's not a bad deal. I mean, you know, looking back on it, it was great. And what I would do is go in and pay them, I'd go and give them $500. They loved me. I'd go and give them $500 and tell them, look, just tell me when I've used that up, and I'll give you some more. So they always had my money. They were always real nice to me. You know, I got to fly when I wanted to. My instructor was a great guy. He was a young kid on his way to becoming a professional airline pilot of some kind, was what his plan was. And that's what most of these instructors are. They're young kids trying to build up their hours so that they can you know, get hired on. The only other way to do that is go through the military. And it's hard to compete with a military guy that ends up with 3,000 or 4,000 hours over his hitch when you're just a private pilot having to pay for it all. So you become an instructor, and that pays for your flying, and you get to log all those hours with your students as being the pilot in command, which is what you are because you're the instructor pilot. Well, anyway, I don't want to get too much of the details of that. It took me a year and a month flying weekends, sometimes twice a weekend, sometimes just once, to get my license. I figure it probably cost me right about $3,000 total. I had about 62 hours, I think, in my logbook when I went to get my when I took my final exam, which was on December 31st. I think it was 91, and got my license to fly a little airplane. And I flew the rental airplane there for a while, and finally found one and ended up buying one. Well, that wasn't so much what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the difference. Now, you know, here we are on these little twisties, and I'm not going to go fast because this guy's up in front of me and he's got his girl on the back, and I don't want to mess with either of them. So, but you know, on a bike, you've got, here we are, we're leaning, we're turning, you know, it's, you go out, you want to ride your bike, what do? You go out, you put the key in it, you start it up, you go. Let me tell you what you have to do when you're going to fly an airplane, a little airplane. I live 20 miles away from the airplane. I couldn't park my airplane in my garage because I don't have a runway. So I had to park it at the flying field. That cost me $35 a month to have a little place in the grass to park my airplane. Now it had tie downs, big metal, in fact I put them in the ground, big metal screws that are like, they hold mobile homes down. If you've ever seen those, it's the same sort of thing. You sink 3 of those in the ground and you hook your airplane to it. Then when a big storm comes through, the wind gets high enough, a plane will fly. Most of the planes I flew, the stall speed was around 40, 45, so if you had a 50 or 60 mile an hour gust through there, that plane would fly all by itself. It just lift up off the ground. So $35 a month, you know, to keep it there. So I want to go fly. I gotta grab my gear, which I kept in a little bag by the door, no problem. Kept my headphones and a charged up radio and all that. And hop in the car. 20 minutes later, I'm at the airfield. Okay, was talking to the guys there, fueling up the airplane if it didn't have fuel from the last time, getting it untied and checking it out good. You got to do a little you have to do a pre-flight. You don't just jump in them and fly. You got to pull a sample of fuel. You got to check your oil. You got to check your tires. You got to look at everything you look at. You got to make sure the controls are free and operating. Then you hop in your plane. Well, you hop in it if you've had an electric starter. If you had, in the rental planes I always flew in, I did have an electric starter. The plane I bought, which is a 1947 Luscombe 8E, did not have an electrical system. So I had to get out there just like the old days and grab the propeller and flip it. And some days it fired right up and some days it didn't. But anyway, so by the time I've done, oh, there you go, there's that good view. By the time I have got it started, you know, of course I'm doing this from outside the airplane. Then I have to go and untie the airplane, set the parking brake, let it idle, and go untie the airplane and hop in it. Start doing my pre-flight check inside there, checking oil pressures, make sure the temperature comes up. Operate the controls again, make sure they're free and proper and correct. Check the brakes. You pretty much check everything. Well, now, let's see, 20 minutes plus, probably another 10 or 15 minutes. So what, I'm coming up on about an hour from the time I decided I wanted to fly a little airplane and the time that I'm actually now in a position to do so. So it'd take about a minute to taxi from my parking spot down to the end of the runway. Do another quick check there, and part of the check would be the run-up. And the run-up is you grab all the brakes, you pull back on the stick. I had a stick in my plane that I owned. Pull the stick back in your belly and push the throttle slowly all the way until you get full throttle. And you make sure that you've got, make sure that the engine is running properly. Now, all these airplanes have a dual ignition system. And so you can run on one mag or the other mag, or both mags. So you check each mag individually by flipping your switch, and you should lose about 50 to 100 RPMs, and you can definitely hear it. And that way you know for sure that both of your ignition systems are working before you've left the ground. Okay, now everything's working. I'm clear. I've talked on the radio. Nobody's coming. It's okay for me to go. Boom! I'm finally off the ground. Now flying is a lot of fun. Flying is similar to the motorcycle in the terms of you can get up there and you can bank it left and bank it right, go up, go down. My favorite thing to do was to fly about 1,000 feet up with the window open at about 80 miles an hour, put my arm in the window and just sit there and just enjoy the countryside. Pretty much like I'm riding, only I'm riding a lot slower. But you know, pretty much the same way. Just enjoy the countryside. And I would fly around for, you know, an hour, 2 hours at the most, usually. Sometimes I'd go to another airport or, you know, something like that, or to a particular, a lot of times I flew over the house. I fly back over the house and fly around and do figure eights and work on my maneuvers, work on turns on a point. That's where you look out the window and you put the wingtip on a house or a smokestack or a tree, and you do a turn. You do a 360-degree turn all the way around it to the right, and then all the way to the left, and you have to keep the wingtip pointed right at that object, and that way you practice your coordinated turns, they call them. I don't want to go into too much of it. If you're interested in it, I'll be glad to do another video and explain a lot more about the mechanicals of flying an airplane. But anyway, so at the end of that time, just say we've flown an hour. Okay, we've come back to the airport. We call on the radio and we make sure that it's okay for us to you know, to keep going. And so you know, we'll make sure the runway's clear so we can land. So we land and taxi back to the spot, cut her off, tie her down. Now we got to do the post-flight check. You make sure you didn't have any oil leaks. You make sure you've got the fuel shut off. You collect the radio, collect all my gear. Go to leave, spend probably another 20 minutes talking to the other guys at the airport, because you know you can't get away. It's just like on a motorcycle. You see somebody and you start talking to them, and you know, it's I'm gonna let this guy behind me by here, and then you head home. It's 20 more minutes to get home. Okay, in that same amount of time that all that's happened, I have gotten on the motorcycle. I have ridden up here into the North Georgia mountains. I've ridden all around. I've got 156 miles, so that's 146 miles that I've ridden on this motorcycle. We're in the airplane at 80 miles an hour for, say, an hour. What did I go? Who knows? You know, 80 miles. And the expense is unbelievable. It's unbelievably different. You know, whether I flew that plane or not, it was over $500 a year to have an annual inspection. Plus, I had to pay property taxes on it. So, anyway, don't get me wrong, I loved flying. Absolutely loved it. I'm so glad that I got to do it. But it was all the flying I did was just basic flying. There wasn't anything fancy. I had a radio, but it was really just to monitor and to announce that I was flying, because I was flying in out of what they call an uncontrolled field. And you don't have to have anything. I didn't have an electrical system, so there was nothing I could do. I guess could have waved flags out the windows, but that wouldn't have done anybody any good. But 9/11 changed all that here in America. All of a sudden, flying became a really serious thing. And quite frankly, it took all the fun out of it for me. I had sold my airplane. I haven't flown since. It just isn't any fun, because you've got to get on the radio, you've got to have the transponder, you're always under scrutiny, you've got to be careful. Hell, when I used to fly to the mountains, I used to fly from my airport to the North Carolina mountains. I would literally fly over the nuclear reactor on Lake Norman right outside of Charlotte. Literally fly right over it. Nowadays, if I tried that, I'd have a police helicopter or an F-16 on my butt, trying to find out why I was up there. So, anyway, well, that's the main difference. I loved them both, but you can see what I'm doing now. For economy and for fun and for actually getting to do it, I highly recommend a motorcycle. Get your pilot's license if you want to. It's a great way to travel a long way. You got to go 600 or 700 miles. That's a great way to go. But anyway, you guys take care. Bye-bye.